everyone. Welcome now to the Morning Watch with host, Reverend Dr. Dalton Toussaint.
Listeners to Love 101 FM are advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Hello and welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you're overseas and on the move, U.S. listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you're in the UK, 0330-332-6541. Or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live. In the first watch today, COVID restrictions vis-a-vis the need to get on with our lives. And in the second watch, a continuation of the series New Year, New You. This morning we are asking, are we thinking right? For our social media question, we ask, how's your mental health? How's your mental health? Please share your responses on our Facebook page, Love 101 FM, and also whether by post or voice note to WhatsApp 876-997-3125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll share your responses later on in the program, but before all of that, here's I quote.
This morning's I quote, instead of worrying about what you cannot control, shift your energy to what you can create. Roy T. Bennett.
That's a great quote. Good morning, Shivani.
Good morning, Rev. How are you?
I'm doing well. And how is Shivani Blair this morning?
Good enough. How you do?
Not seeing you though, not seeing you. How you hiding?
But he's good.
Did you notice? Did you notice the question for the feedback?
How is your mental health?
Yes, I'm asking you now.
I'm coping. I'm coping.
Well, I tell you, the thing turn up in Jamaica,
Quite a
Shivani.
battle. Yes.
Yeah. So we all have to maintain our mental health.
Yeah.
All right. The first watch will be back after this break.
Planning to sit the May-June CXC exams privately? Register with Overseas Examinations Commission before the late registration deadline, Friday, January 21. Visit our Kingston office or Montego Bay office to complete your application form or send an email to help@overseasexams.org.jm. Follow our social media pages at Overseas Exams for more details. Remember, if you plan to sit the May-June CXC exams privately, the late registration deadline is January 21.
There are a million reasons to want to own a home.
I want more space for the children.
I am tired of paying rent.
My wife and I want an investment.
Go from future plans to keys in hand with an NCB mortgage. Get rates as low as 6.95%, 100% financing, and up to 40 years to repay. Plus, get the life insurance and home insurance you need all in one place. Visit myhome.jncb.com to get started. Conditions apply.
Do women find the men more attractive with a fresh haircut or a properly groomed beard? Do men have a self-care regimen, or is grooming just not a man thing? We'll find out this Wednesday, January 19, inside the Mailbox, the program designed for men, hosted by men, with guests who are men, as we take a look at men's grooming and self-care. What are some must-dos and haves for men when it comes to grooming? And how can a man start his self-care regimen? So join us as we discuss this and more inside the new season of the Mailbox, this Wednesday, January 19 at 5:30 p.m. with hosts Kevin Bailey and Courtney Morrison. And it will be happening here on Love 101, the family station.
And the Morning Watch today is brought to you by Home and Things, your construction finishes superstore.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Now, in light of the fourth wave of COVID-19 and the daily increases in infection as well as hospitalization, should the government again resort to stricter and tighter measures? The Prime Minister says we need to get on with our lives in spite of the pandemic. But how do we really do that in a practical way? Well, to answer these and other related questions, we have online Dr. Brian James, President of the Medical Association of Jamaica, and Mr. Michael Leckie, President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica. Good morning to you both, and all the best for 2022.
Good morning. Thank you. The same to you.
Yeah, morning, Dr. Stan. Morning, Dr. James, and morning, Jerry.
Great. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, how has the pandemic, and in particular the recent surge, affected members of your organization and their effectiveness? Beginning with you, Mr. Leckie.
Yes, morning again, and I must, if you see a sign in my voice, because this pandemic continues to be a challenge to MSMEs across Jamaica. And since the wave, it has gotten worse, because what is happening is that some of our members who are family-owned businesses and so on, they have to really close to attend to their own health. And during the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, 2020, year 2019, which was prior, we have seen a shutdown and closures of over 40% of MSMEs in Jamaica. And since then, we have been grappling, most of our members have been grappling to stay open, and it's been a challenge up to today.
What percentage you said, Mr. Leckie? I'm sorry. What percentage did you say?
40% closure.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, it is that high. And although we are having these challenges with the COVID, we now have to rethink along the lines of how we can survive and how we can diversify our businesses, and we have less human hands-on in order to survive.
Dr. James?
Good morning again.
Morning.
I think the point that Mr. Leckie made exemplifies our position. What we have been having would be a similar kind of issue. We have to deal with our personal health. Plus, whenever there is a surge, we end up having to handle all of the fallout from the surge. And what happens during a surge is that many more people get the virus, and many more people end up in hospitals. And a COVID patient in hospital is one of the most difficult patients to deal with. It destroys resources, it heats up oxygen, it causes a lot of stress. It is a very unforgiving illness to treat. You might be doing all you can, and you think that things are going well, and suddenly the patient deteriorates and may even die. And so that has a very, very severe psychological toll on all of the healthcare workers. So we are having a very, very difficult time. And one of the things that I would want to say is that the conversation should not be crafted in terms of a dichotomy between locking down the country and getting on with our business, because in actual fact, that for one, Jamaica has never been locked down. Certainly not for more than about 11 days overall in the 2 years. that there were no movement days. We have pursued, the authorities have pursued a very sensible strategy of restricting movement and implementing measures in order to keep us going business as usual. And we absolutely support that kind of arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
What we are asking for is for measures that have been shown to work, for us to implement them so that we can have a situation where the peak of this wave is not as high as it is likely to be otherwise, and so we can get on with our business. So it is a balance that we need to strike. This pandemic has taught us, trying to teach us to develop a balance in the way we do things. It cannot be business as it was before,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have to be complete and total restriction and lockdown and distress and mayhem. And that is our message.
Dr. James, in terms of the doctors in your association, any percentage, any idea in terms of those who have reported ill?
It's difficult to get a national figure, but when I check around the hospitals, we're talking, it's more than 10% of the healthcare workers. It's not simply a matter of doctors, but doctors, nurses, porters, physiotherapists, pharmacists, everyone, right? It's over 10% in almost every hospital that I have checked. And what that does is that it reduces the cohort of carers. So given that the admission rates are now going up really high, we're at 492 around, this is for people who tested positive. There would be another couple hundred, I would estimate, who are waiting for their test results. So you're talking about more like 600 people are in hospital, COVID related. And what that does is when you get sick, when 10% of your cohort of workers get sick, then you are only working with 9 out of 10 people still there having to take on the work of all 10 people.
Yeah. And the bed capacity is what, 700? Something like that?
The bed capacity that we were told during the last wave was 860. That's what I recall saying.
Okay.
But when we check the hospitals, we're realizing that as it stands now, most hospitals are at capacity or above capacity. There's one hospital that is 205% of capacity.
Wow.
So, you know, there things change quite dramatically from day to day, even hour to hour. But, you know, it is not a good situation. We have to try to do something about it in the moment.
Yeah. All right. We are up on a break, gentlemen. Please hold your thoughts. We'll be right back in a couple of minutes.
What are you saying, Natalie?
Digicel, the winner's circle for the second year running. This time, walking away with the award for Jamaica's fastest mobile network, best mobile coverage, and fastest home fiber internet. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Digicel.
Didn't catch that? It's just the truth. Digicel is the fastest LTE and home fiber internet in Jamaica, giving coverage and speeds you can rely on over and over again. Digicel, better together.
Entrepreneurs, now you've got more support in your corner. Introducing Sagicor Bank Business Resource Center, where entrepreneurs benefit from free training in business management, financial support and guidance from pros, as well as research capabilities. Sagicor Bank, in partnership with the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, brings you this first center of its kind for small entrepreneurs to develop and grow. Let's help you take your business to the next level of success. Contact Sagicor Bank Business Resource Center today. WhatsApp 876-997-3745.
Joy is one of the 9th fruit of the Spirit. The word joy appears almost 200 times in the Bible. Sometimes we confuse joy with happiness, but they are different. How do we know? Where does joy come from? How can we get it? And what does finding joy in the midst of the storm mean? Can no one really take away our joy? Tuesday, January 18 on The Rock. Join host Bishop Harold Steve Blair and guests Harry Walcott and Bishop Courtney McLean as they discuss this topic, joy. That's The Rock, Tuesday, January 18 at 10 a.m. on the family station, Love 101.
This is Love 101. It's 17 minutes after 7 o'clock.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. And in this, the first watch, we are looking on the topic, COVID restrictions vis-a-vis the need to get on with our lives. We have online Dr. Brian James, President of the Medical Association of Jamaica, and Mr. Michael Leckie, President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica. Gentlemen, recently the Prime Minister responded to a question about lockdowns by stating that there'll be no return to lockdowns and that persons should, quote unquote, go and get vaccinated. Argument done. What are your thoughts in that regard? Begin with you, Mr. Leckie. Is argument really done?
I agree that the argument done in perspective. First of all, let us really look at the economy of Jamaica itself. And I understand the delicate balance that the government has in terms of it has to meet its internal and external debt, where it has to make payment, and also the health of the economy. But the small businesses, I have to advocate here. The government now has to look at the economy in its totality. We depend on both tourism and the bauxite, which are the major earners of foreign exchange. What the government now has to look at is to diversify the economy. Diversified is where we have now had to look at other earners of foreign exchange. Look at what we do best. Look at what we grow best. So the farming has to play a critical role both as a foreign exchange earner and food security. And this is where we now have to look at it. And then incentivize small businesses where they now play a role in the economy, because no longer can we depend on remittances to hold up Jamaica, because that cannot be sustainable. So this is where we have to look at it. When the Prime Minister's argument done, he is now looking from the perspective that people have to think about their personal responsibility. They have to make their adjustments to make sure they keep their family and themselves safe and healthy. So what he seemed to be thinking about that. Listen, I have done all that I have done. I've created all of that, and now what we are getting is that we're not getting the result. We're only getting about 20-21% take up of the vaccination. So maybe a bit of frustration from the Prime Minister, but the economy has to go on, and the health of the small business and the workers have to be taken into consideration. So what I am pushing for is that, based on our history and our experiences of the ways and the different the different mutations and what we're getting from the pandemic, we now have to make our adjustments internally as a country.
Mm-hmm.
Allow businesses now to make their decisions around it, so we both survive during the lockdown. During the pandemic, and we survive going forward, because we, according to Dr. James and the experts, it does not end here. So we have to continue.
So let me get it clear, Mr. Lecky.
Yes.
Are you in favor of tighter restrictions, especially throughout this fourth wave of the pandemic? Or must things remain as is?
No, remain as is, because what I'm fear about our experience. And based on our experiences, we know that we can make the adjustments. And all the adjustments that we need to make, the government has to take the lead and make the adjustments so others can say, okay, government and everybody directly within government sphere are making also their adjustments. Whether within the workplace, look at the protocols, make sure everybody adhere to it, so we can move on with our life.
With hospitalization increasing, Mr. Lecky?
I understand the hospitalization are increasing, and I understand the delicate balance that there is. But we cannot turn our eyes away from the health of the economy also. So it is a matter of now making the adjustment where we can have less persons involved, meaning look at what things we can do and produce with less human intervention. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, Dr. James, your take on that?
Yes, well, in terms of whether or not the argument is done, I would agree that it's time to finish the argument, but continue with the discussion. I believe that this is the time for all of us to recognize that this is not a pandemic that is a pandemic of the healthcare system. It's a pandemic of the entire country. It's a national issue, and it affects the economy, the pandemic itself, and therefore the discussion has to continue, as Mr. Lecky was saying, about how we're going to make adjustments in order to handle it. Now, we would have to contextualize this into two parts at least. One is the overall pandemic, and two, the surge that we're in. Now, the vaccination program that the Prime Minister would have spoken about would address the overall pandemic. That would be a part of the answer to avoiding these waves in the future. So the fifth wave, which will happen if this one doesn't cause herd immunity, it's the best way of avoiding that is by getting a group of people, 65% of us at least, vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
However, what is happening now is that we have a fourth savage wave upon us. And that doesn't spare the business community, as Mr. Lecky was saying. He says that his voice is gone because of this wave. And I can guarantee you that in his company and in all the companies around Jamaica, there are lots and lots of people who are going to be off sick. So the wave itself affects the ability of the economy to go. And a part of the reason, this is a part of the reason why we are advocating measures that have been proven. The very same Prime Minister has, from time to time, explained how well these measures have worked.
I.e.?
The measures of, one, school. School is a problem. Sending out children in a situation where we have a positivity of 60 to 70% cannot be a good way to handle the peak of the wave, right? So the first thing that I think that we need to do is to suspend face-to-face for until the wave goes down. It is expected to go down another 2 or 3 weeks, right? Second thing is we moved the curfew times from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock about 2 or 3 months ago. That is another thing that we can do. We can go back to that. It was put at 8 o'clock because it was believed that 8 o'clock was working. The third thing is that we need to enforce the rules that we have. Currently, there is the Disaster Risk Management Act stipulates that we should have gatherings of no more than 10 people. We can enforce that. If we enforce all of those things, if we enforce the curfew, then we are on our way to trying to blunt the effects of this particular wave. And finally, and I'm sure there are lots of very bright people around Jamaica. But finally, from my perspective so far, is the work from home stipulations that were in the Disaster Risk Management Act that have been removed. They can be put back. In fact, most people are ending up having to be on quarantine or isolated anyway. So we can get people, diminish the crowds and so on. All the countries around the world have recognized that this is one way, and Jamaica was a leader certainly in that first wave, right, where we said we are not going to lock down the country, we are going to put in measures, and they worked.
Let me hear Mr. Lecky on that. It sounds reasonable to you, Mr. Lecky. Move back to 8 o'clock curfew.
At 10 o'clock is a comfortable time based on what my members are saying. And I understand what Dr. James is saying.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that Dr. James is saying based on the pandemic and the wave and the crisis we are in, we need to go back to 8 o'clock. You might be comfortable with it now, but what about the concerns?
Yes, I understand clearly. But I must say that we are willing to look at the 10 o'clock and look at the protocols that can be put in place so we can adhere to all of it. And although small businesses work from home does not affect us, but it's like I tell you, any time the wave hits, we are affected by the owners and the operators of small business. And that's the blunt of the problem. But I am saying stricter measures, but not in terms of the timing of the closure.
Okay.
That is where I have a problem.
Okay. Because 8 o'clock in reality, persons would have to be shutting down from at least 7 o'clock.
Or 6.
Or 6,
okay. In order to allow after you doing your checks of inventories and so on. And
right, the practicality of it. Yeah.
So that's what you have to look at.
Yeah, Dr. James, just want to squeeze in a question to you. We have to wrap soon. Recently, you reportedly called for review of the Ministry of Health and Wellness protocol, which requires healthcare workers to continue working if they test positive for COVID but show no symptoms. Can you elaborate on that? Because I'm finding that very curious.
No, that was an error in reporting. What I was calling for was a review of the existing protocols.
So the newspaper inaccurately reported that.
Yeah, that was. I think the reporter misunderstood what I was calling.
Okay. So clarify quickly.
So what has happened is this new protocol that was just introduced last week, Thursday, that is what I was calling for. Because what was happening before is that if you're symptomatic and you test positive, you had to stay out for 14 days, right? And if you're asymptomatic, you end up having to be tested at day 14, and then it takes another 4 days for the results to come back. So you're out for 17 or 18 days. And this was affecting the number of people available to take care of the sick patient. And the United States had actually reduced their period to 5 days. And people were asking for that. We could not just follow the United States. So what I was asking for is for us to review what we have. And they have done so. And it is now a lot.
We got it. Thank you very much, Dr. James and Mr. Lecky. Have a productive day. Keep safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Same thing.
Listeners, the Morning Watch will return in just a moment.
Now with no processing fees and no down payment, it's time to open the door to your own sweet home. The time by JN Bank is
7:31.
Do what? Nobody light it.
What you man say? Do what? No light what?
Nobody light it. You know, sister, we in a dry season. Plus breeze a blow. You are set we up for disaster.
Disaster? What kind of disaster?
Bushfire, Joe. Bushfire. If that the fire they catch and spread, we can lose everything. House, land, car, gone. See a carelessness. Nobody light it.
You know what, true? I feel with duty to protect life and property.
Yes. Me glad you respect the warning.
This message was brought to you by Jamaicans Against Bushfires. JAB. Plan. Protect. Prevent. Attention seniors, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is now accepting applications for the social pension program. If you are 75 years or older and do not have a pension or steady income, you should apply. Take your government ID, birth certificate, NIS and TRN cards, and your bank account details. Remember, if you receive PATH or poor relief, your benefit will be transferred to the new program. For more information, call 876-922-8007. The Social Pension Program, caring for our elderly. A message from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Let's take a look at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. In the Gleaner, judge blocks defamation claims by FLA ex-officers. And also, man in witness protection program says he is on the brink of suicide. Also in the Gleaner, terminating road contract not so easy, says E.G. Hunter. In the Observer, SOS for doctors, nurses. Sarah freezes all non-essential leave and recalls those already out. Also, judge alone trials are popular pick among defendants. We also see in the Observer 2 reggae boys, official, test positive for COVID ahead of departure for Peru. Sorry to hear about that. Well, coming up next, we'll read some of the feedback from our Facebook and WhatsApp question. How is your mental health? How is your mental health? Please share your responses on our Facebook page, Love 101 FM, and also whether by text or voice note to WhatsApp 876-997-3125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
Joy is one of the 9th fruit of the Spirit. The word joy appears almost 200 times in the Bible. Sometimes we confuse joy with happiness, but they are different. How do we know? Where does joy come from? How can we get it? And what does finding joy in the midst of the storm mean? Can no one really take away our joy? Tuesday, January 18 on The Rock. Join host Bishop Harold Steve Blair and guests Harry Walcott and Bishop Courtney McLean as they discuss this topic, joy. That's The Rock, Tuesday, January 18 at 10 a.m. on the family station, Love 101.
Receive words of strength from Voice of Power, radio voice of the Power of Faith Ministries in Portmore with Bishop Dr. Delford Davis.
The battle of seed has been declared many years ago and it's still raging. I will put enmity between thee and between the woman, thy seed and her seed. A war will be on perpetually until Jesus returns. But I know who has already won the war. I know who has already won the war.
That's Voice of Power, radio voice of the Power of Faith Ministries with Bishop Dr. Delford Davis every first and third Thursday at 9:30 a.m. on the family station, Love 101.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to the Morning Watch, and I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Let's join Shivani for a look at how our Facebook and WhatsApp friends answered today's question. How's your mental health, Shivani?
Reverend Toussaint and Brother Shivani, good morning. Reverend Toussaint, you asked a very hard question this morning about the mental health, if I was hearing right. Because remember that most time it's only when the mental health becomes unhealthy that we find out that our mental health is not in a very good position. Well, right now, mine hasn't started acting up yet, so I think it is not too bad. Have a good day.
Right.
Oh boy.
Thank you for that, Sister Matilda. I know.
Any more responses, Shivani?
I've seen Marlene on Facebook says, I'm a mental health counselor and I have to do a lot of self-care on a regular basis so I don't get burnout. All right. Yeah, that's all I've seen now. Yeah. Those are the-
Might not have started acting up yet either.
Well, I'm coping.
We're doing okay, brother. We're doing okay. We're doing okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to those who responded. We now segue to the second watch. Now, when we talk or hear others talk about mental health, what comes to mind? And what are our concerns about ourselves and also about others in this regard? Well, today we continue our series entitled New You, New Year, New You. And so this morning, the question under consideration is, are we thinking right? Are we thinking right? Focusing on our mental health. And to assist us in answering this question, we have joining us Dr. Maureen Irons Morgan, consultant psychiatrist. Good morning, Doc, and all the best. All the best for 2022.
Thank you, and the very same to you and your listeners.
Great. All right, we have a lot of ground to cover because we're talking about something that is deep and wide, the whole matter of mental health. Doc, what constitutes mental health and how important is it for personal and societal well-being?
Okay, so when we talk about mental health, first of all, recognize that mental health is an important part of your whole health. And it interacts very closely with the physical health, psychological, and even spiritual. So mental health may be defined as that state of well-being in which the person is able to realize his own abilities. You can cope with normal stresses of life. You can work and contribute to community. It includes your emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Basically, it affects how we think, how we act, how we feel. So, in a nutshell, that's your mental health. Now, your mental health is obviously then very important because it really affects, how, as we said, how you think, how you feel, how you behave.
Mm-hmm.
So if your mental health is, impacted in a negative way, then your thinking, feeling, and behavior will be also impacted.
Are there different types of mental illnesses?
Definitely. So it's important to also realize that mental illness now is, you see, you have mental health, you have mental illness. And sometimes people tend to mix them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are different types of mental illnesses. Some broad groups that we may look at. There are what we call the psychotic disorders. These are the illnesses that really affect your thinking in such a way that your perception of reality is affected and you're out of touch with reality. And this includes schizophrenia that, we often hear about. And you're out of touch with reality. And in this group of illnesses, people are likely to experience hallucinations, for example, hearing voices, seeing things that don't exist in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the other broad group called the mood disorders, which are more common, really. And in this group, you'll find depression, major depressive disorder, where your mood is just down. It is more than just ordinary sadness. It's a down, it's a dark place, and everything looks dismal. And there's a risk of people even contemplating suicide in major depression. And then there's a bipolar disorder, which is like manic or depressive or swinging between the both. So the mood can go up or down, and it might be a cyclical thing. And so those are the mood disorders. Then the even more common group is what we call the anxiety disorders. Now, anxiety disorders are so prevalent, highly prevalent.
Yes.
But, and I think a lot of it goes unrecognized and undiagnosed and therefore untreated. And in this group of anxiety disorders, we have what is called generalized anxiety disorders, where people tend to worry about everything, excessively worried about everything. Then there's a social anxiety disorders that you tend to be afraid of, public places or being observed by people or being the center of attention, afraid to talk up in a group and so on. Then there are the specific phobias where you're just very fearful of something in particular. For example, fearful of driving or fearful of flying or fearful of heights or so. To the extent where it affects your ability to function normally. Then there's what we call it obsessive compulsive disorders. People are excessively neat and clean and so on. And then there's the other group of disorders, final one, which is called personality disorders. And this one often too is something that goes undiagnosed because, it just has some people see. And really it's a kind of maladaptive way of functioning where people often cause distress to other people because of how they relate to them.
Tell you what, Doc.
Not
Could you
because
just
they're different group.
yeah, tell you what, Doc, could you just hold that thought? We're up on a break. We'll be right back.
This is Love 101. It is 7:45. Please do stay with us right here on the Sound of Love.
From generation to generation, Jamaicans have depended on J&B Bank to make the pride and joy of providing a safe place for their families possible. Now, with no processing fees and no down payment mortgage options, you can open the door to your own sweet home, a legacy to hand to your next generation. Visit jnbank.com to get pre-approved today. J&B Bank will help you find a way.
Planning to sit the May-June CXC exams privately? Register with Overseas Examinations Commission before the late registration deadline, Friday, January 21. Visit our Kingston office or Montego Bay office to complete your application form or send an email to help@overseasexams.org.jm. Follow our social media pages at Overseas Exams for more details. Remember, if you plan to sit the May-June CXC exams privately, the late registration deadline is January 21.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint, and in this, the second watch, we're simply asking the question, are we thinking right? As we discuss mental health in our series, New Year, New You. And we have online Dr. Maureen Irons-Morgan, consultant psychiatrist. And before the break, she was telling us about the different types of mental illnesses coming under psychotic disorders, mood disorders, bipolar disorders, and anxiety disorders. You have more to tell us on that, Doc?
Not really, except to say that just remember that when we talk about mental health, the point needs to be made that mental health is more than the absence of a mental illness. You understand? In other words, wider.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't have a mental illness, you can still have mental health challenges which need attention. You see? So we all are striving to get optimal mental health.
Right.
And so even if you don't have a mental illness, you don't have a diagnosis, there's still scope to improve your mental health by, doing a lot of things that you can do to help yourself.
Which we're going to come to.
Yes.
Yeah, but before we even go there, Doc, I must ask you this as a rider to the second question I asked you about the different types of mental illnesses. You gave us a list, right? At what stage do we call persons, I don't know if it's even an appropriate terminology, but mad or insane? At what stage, yeah.
Those are not terms that we use.
Right.
Because they're very stigmatizing.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment you talk about mad or insane, you begin to label people. And,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of stigma surrounding mental health issues. And it makes people not want to disclose that they are having such symptoms, and you're going to secrecy, and then you don't get the appropriate treatment, and it affects your ability to function and to relate to other people. So we prefer not to use those terms. Now, the point is that if you are having symptoms that are distressing to you and are affecting in your functioning, your normal functioning, it is important to seek help. And it's important to get the appropriate help, because what we know, you see, back in the day, it wasn't quite clear, and even now it is not entirely clear what are the causes of mental illnesses. But what we do know is that the brain is really that organ in your body that, generates the thoughts and the feelings and the perception. And if the brain is affected by chemical imbalance or anything else, or, trauma or so, then the brain is affected, and therein the mental illnesses or the different mental challenges can be generated.
Yeah, years ago, I think Professor Hicklin recordedly said that nearly 41% of the Jamaican population is eligible for a personality disorder diagnosis.
That is true.
That more than a third of the population suffers from one form of mental disorder or has suffered from it. What are the signs that we need to look for, the telltale signs or symptoms?
Yes, that statement, that Professor Hicklin made, the late Professor Hicklin, it often resonates in my mind, because sometimes you really wonder. And so, it's the, remember I said with the personality disorders, it is not the kind of thing that is sort of diagnosed up front, but it affects your ability to function normally. It's maladaptive. It often causes distresses in others more than in yourself, because people think that nothing is wrong with me, everything is wrong with them. And nowadays, I find that there's a lot of talk about the narcissistic personality disorder, for example, just to pull out one of them that I hear people talk about a lot. And basically, it is that kind of personality where the person thinks extremely highly of himself or herself and his abilities, and they're often unable to show empathy. And empathy is that ability to, feel for other people, to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and to relate to that person accordingly. And, their own opinion, they sort of regard their own opinion and their abilities much higher than they ought to. So it can cause a lot of, obviously, a lot of problems relating to people, because you're not relating with the love and the compassion and the caring, and you're very self-centered and very selfish. So sometimes we see some, then the thing is, Reverend Toussaint, what we have to remember is that, as I said before, even if you don't have a diagnosis, you can have, challenges along the way. You can have traits, have the full diagnosis. So these are some of the issues. So some of the other telltale signs, just difficulty coping, just difficulty functioning. For example, people might be so down that they cannot get up in the morning to go to work. They just can't face the day. They have difficulty thinking, difficulty concentrating at work. Sometimes we have what we call presenteeism. You go to work, but you're not there mentally. So you're just there in body. And these things affect productivity in the workplace. Or people may have excessive fears or worries. And we know that in Jamaica now, we do have a lot of things that people
crime and violence and the pandemic.
Crime and violence and so on. But we're talking where people take it to the extent where they're totally preoccupied, with this thing, and worrying about every little thing. Am I going to get COVID? Is my family going to die? Am I going to die? And what is going to happen tomorrow? And suppose there's nobody at the hospital to treat me. And suppose when I go there, and and it goes on and on and on to the extent where you can't even function. And then, as we said before, sometimes the abnormality in your perception of reality, where you begin to, to read things into things that are not there. You see somebody make a movement and you figure it's something directly related to you, and they're saying something about you. or so on. So all of these are some of the symptoms.
But then, Dr. Hans Morgan, shouldn't the percentage that Professor Hicklin gave years ago, shouldn't be larger than that? I mean, what you're saying don't sound like all of us. I mean, how we know?
That is why I said that there's mental health challenges and there are diagnoses. So when we say that we have a diagnosis, that means that someone has assessed you on a set criteria that has been set out clinically. You understand? And say, okay, you fulfill all of this. And therefore, we can say that you have that diagnosis. But between mental health and that mental illness, there are many areas of gradation, So you can have symptoms that need attention that will help you to have better mental health. But you're right that we're all in this together. It is not them and us. We all, from time to time, will experience some of these symptoms because mental health is just a part of our own health.
How's it treated now? And what are the options in that regard?
Okay. So in terms of treatment, basically there are two approaches. There's medication and there's what is called psychotherapy. A lot of people are afraid of medication. And let me say straight up front, there's no need to be afraid of medication. If you need medication, it is very important to approach it in a positive way. Just like how you take medication for hypertension or diabetes, you should definitely take medication for a mental health problem because there are actual chemical changes that affect your mood and affect you the way you perceive reality. And this is why medication works. For example, we have the antidepressants, which affect the serotonin level. And it's not that it even introduces anything to your body, it just regulates what your body does. And your mood improves. And when people take it, they'll tell you that, oh my gosh, this is like night and day. It's a difference. It makes a difference. And we're not talking about addictive medication. That's the other thing people worry about. I am going to dedicate it. Now, there are addictive medications, but we tend to use those very cautiously. And sometimes those are necessary for immediate relief of anxiety, for example. But they are not the sort of, long stay. Then there's the other medication, the antipsychotic medication. Now, if you need this, you need to take it because this is what will affect the abnormal perceptions, like the voices and hearing things that are not there, and the perceiving of paranoid intention of others that don't exist, and so on.
You might have to speed up, Doc, because I have only 1 minute left, okay?
Okay. So psychotherapy is talk therapy. And it's helping people to manage their thoughts. And this is where, as Christians, you can, the Bible talks about being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right.
It is basically that process. And helping you to renew your mind. I must say, Reverend Toussaint, healthy living generally is important. So eating properly, exercise, making social connections. Even this COVID time, we are physically distant, but not socially distant. Expressing your emotions, using journals, doing hobbies, things that you enjoy. All of these things are important. Relationships, all of these things are important to your mental health.
Yes.
Yes,
and in terms of, there's a difference between the psychiatrist and the psychologist in that regard, in terms of diagnosis and medication.
Is a medical doctor who has specialized in mental health treatment. The psychologist is not a medical doctor, but is someone who has who's an expert in human behavior and in treating people in psychotherapy doing investigations and so on into your
Great. So informative, so insightful. We want to thank you so very much, Dr. Ans Morgan, for joining us. Have a productive
Thank you
day.
very much for having me, Reverend Justin.
Bless you. Thank you, listeners, for being with us. For information how to get copies of this program, call our production department at 876-968-9596-7. You can now listen to the Morning Watch on Love 101 app. Download it today. Now, this has been the Morning Watch, of course, and thanks to our producer, Miss Kathy Gale, and our guests. I'm Dylan Toussaint. Hand you back to Love in the Morning with Shavoni Blair.
Brought to you by Home and Things, your construction finishes superstore. It's 8:01.